In a strange apartment in Britain, where doors open by themselves and voices whisper in the dark, Face finds himself facing a hidden world of jinn. Will he escape before it's too late? The events of this story did not happen in Kuwait. Rather, they took place in England. Face with the jinn, but before I begin this story, have you ever heard about the inhabitants of a house? Is it possible that there are Muslim jinn living with you in the house and residing in it? Let's immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of the story, as told by Face himself. Face, as he mentioned, said, I received a scholarship abroad in Britain, specifically in the Sunderland area. I traveled to this area in 2019, and with all my ambitions and hopes, I was studying electrical and electronic engineering. When I first arrived in 2019, I stayed in student accommodation for a while until I decided in 2020, or late 2020, to get my own place. I found a place that was perfect, a 3-story apartment with 3 rooms, and the rent at that time was cheap for its size, around 300 Kuwaiti dinars. I was pleased that it was affordable and spacious, so I happily moved in and immediately signed a long-term contract with them, paid the rent, and started moving my belongings into the apartment. Of course, I didn't notice anything unusual at first. I remember my sister decided to visit me from Kuwait to check on me and make sure everything was okay. She wanted to make sure her brother was doing well and to help me settle into the apartment. I was happy about this, and my sister traveled from Kuwait to Britain, came to visit me, and I welcomed her warmly. I had planned for her to stay with me for a month, and we had also planned to travel to Scotland together for a change of scenery. That was our agreement. I remember she unpacked her things, settled in, and got everything organized. At that time, I was a member of a gym, and on that day, I told her I was going to the gym and would be back soon, okay? I left her alone in the apartment, confident that everything was fine. I went and spent some time at the gym, and when I returned to the apartment, I found my sister in her room, scared, no, terrified. I asked her, what's wrong? Is everything okay? She hesitated but finally spoke, saying that while she was sitting in the living room, the bathroom door opened by itself. May God protect us. And she waited for someone to come out, but then it closed on its own. I reassured her, saying it was nothing, and that I had been in the apartment for a few days and hadn't noticed anything unusual. She insisted, no, it's not just that. I heard footsteps, and when I looked, I saw an old man muttering something and walking up the stairs. I tried to calm her down, saying, in the name of God, there's nothing to worry about. The fear was evident on her face, so I decided to prove to her that there was nothing wrong. I started walking up the stairs to show her that everything was fine and that there was nothing to fear. I had been in the apartment for a few days, and everything had been fine. I began climbing the stairs, but I felt a strange unease or fear, even though I knew there was nothing wrong. I kept saying, in the name of God, until I reached the top, and thankfully, there was nothing there. I came back down, laughing and joking with her, saying, you must be tired from the trip. It's affecting you. Don't worry. Tomorrow we'll go to Scotland and change the scenery. We agreed, and the next day, we traveled to Scotland, spent a few days there, enjoyed ourselves, and then returned to the apartment. That's when the second chapter of this story began. Everything seemed fine until late at night. I remembered there was a spot on the upper floor where I would sit, with the TV in front of me and the balcony to my right. My sister was sitting on the couch, and we were watching a movie. Suddenly, as if I had been hypnotized, I fell asleep without realizing it, and so did my sister. But while she was asleep, her eyes were open, and she couldn't move or speak. It was as if she was paralyzed. She saw the balcony door opening and closing forcefully, and she tried to say, in the name of God, but couldn't. The door would slam shut and then open again, and she kept trying to recite God's name to ward off the evil. This happened that night, and the next morning I woke up shocked. I looked at my sister, and she was sitting there, terrified. I asked her, what's wrong? Are you okay? She said, I'm fine, but I want to go back to Kuwait. I can't stay here anymore. I was confused and asked her why she wanted to leave so suddenly, especially since she had just arrived and was supposed to stay for a month. She insisted, saying she couldn't stay in this place anymore and that she missed Kuwait. No matter how much I tried to convince her, she refused to stay. Eventually, I had to book her a flight and take her to the airport. Before she left, she turned to me and said, "Face, take care of yourself, remember God, recite the protective prayers, and don't forget your prayers." I was puzzled by her behavior, especially since I was already diligent in my prayers. I asked her what was wrong, and she started telling me about what she had seen in the apartment from the first day. The bathroom door opening by itself. The old man walking up the stairs muttering something she couldn't understand. And the balcony incident. I laughed and told her to remember God, as I had been in the apartment for a few days and hadn't seen anything unusual. She insisted, "I'm warning you, take care of yourself, recite the protective prayers, and read the Quran in the apartment." I didn't take her words seriously, and after she left, I returned to the apartment, feeling the loneliness and strangeness of the place. I finished my work and returned to the apartment late at night. The apartment, as I mentioned, had 3 floors, and I was alone in it. I decided to go upstairs and watch TV. I sat in the living room, with the couch to my side and the balcony in front of me. I felt drowsy and fell asleep, only to wake up hearing strange voices behind me. There were 3 people talking, and their voices were clear. They were speaking in Arabic. I tried to turn around to see them, but a rough hand pushed my face back onto the couch, preventing me from looking. I could hear them clearly, 2 men and a woman. One of them said, "Get up, there are 10 minutes left until Far." I realized they were jinn, and they were telling me to wake up and pray. The woman said, "Let him sleep, poor thing." But the man insisted, "No, he must pray Far." They even called me by my name, "Face, get up and pray. There are 10 minutes left." I felt paralyzed, unable to move except for my eyes. I got up and walked toward the bathroom, and I could see 3 figures standing by the balcony watching me. I performed ablution and prayed, then went back to sleep. I didn't wake up until the next afternoon, feeling exhausted. I was shocked by what had happened the previous night. Was it real, or was I dreaming? I was so tired that I couldn't sleep, so I decided not to sleep in that room anymore. I went to my bedroom, lay down on the bed, and tried to sleep. Just as I was drifting off, the door to my room opened. I saw a short figure entering. It looked like a dwarf, but its head was that of an animal. I couldn't move, only watch in horror as it attacked me, biting and scratching me. I screamed, "I seek refuge in God from Satan," and it disappeared. I was drenched in sweat, terrified, and in shock. The door to my room was open, even though I had locked it. I recited God's name and tried to calm myself down. I went downstairs, performed ablution, and prayed dur. I was exhausted and needed sleep, but I was too scared to sleep in my room, so I went to the room downstairs and fell into a deep sleep. I woke up late at night to the sound of footsteps upstairs, even though I was alone in the house. I recited God's name and sought refuge from Satan, realizing that the voices I was hearing were from jinn. The house was haunted. I started reading the Quran and tried to strengthen myself, seeking refuge from Satan until morning. But imagine being alone in a house and hearing someone call your name, "Face, face." I felt like my soul was about to leave my body from fear. I gathered my courage, continued reading the Quran, and tried to ignore the voices until morning. I decided to go to the university. I had an exam to finish, and afterward, I planned to rent out the apartment or find a way to get rid of it. I finished my tasks and went to several rental offices, but every time I mentioned the location of the apartment, whether to English or Arab clients, they would refuse, as if they knew the place was haunted. After a long and exhausting day, I returned to the apartment, resigned to my fate. I entered the house, fearful, recited God's name, and went upstairs to the kitchen to prepare some food. I sat in the living room, next to the balcony, with the TV in front of me. It was around Maghrib time, and I fell asleep from exhaustion. I woke up to the sound of the apartment door knocking. It was around 7:49 p.m., a time I'll never forget because the clock was right in front of me. The Isha prayer was at 8:11 p.m. I heard the door knock again, but I couldn't move. My face was turned toward the balcony, and my body felt paralyzed. I tried to move but couldn't. Suddenly, the door downstairs opened, and I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I called out, "Who's there?" but got no response. Then, to my shock, I saw my father standing in front of me. My father, who had passed away years ago, was standing there angry, and he shouted at me, "Face, get up and pray. Why are you sleeping?" I was in complete shock, unable to speak or move. My father turned around and walked out of the room, and I heard his footsteps descending the stairs. At that moment, I felt as if I had been tied down with ropes, and I broke free. I recited God's name, sought refuge from Satan, and walked toward the door, still in shock. I went downstairs, reciting God's name and seeking refuge from Satan, trying to process what I had just seen, my deceased father standing in front of me. I decided to pray and turned on the Quran recitation to calm myself down. Afterward, I went to the rental office to explain what had been happening and to ask for my money back, but they refused. I had no choice but to stay in the apartment because I had already paid a deposit. From that day on, I constantly recited the Quran and avoided going upstairs. I would hear their voices, and during prayer times, they would call my name, "Face, it's time to pray." I got used to it, and by God's grace, through reading the protective prayers and maintaining my prayers, I endured until I was finally able to leave that place. My advice to every expatriate or student studying abroad is to always try to have someone with you in your accommodation. Don't live alone, and always remember to recite the protective prayers and maintain your prayers. This is my story of what happened in that house in Britain, and today, by God's grace, I have graduated and returned to Kuwait. May God protect you, and may He strengthen the hearts of those who endure such trials. Can you imagine seeing your deceased father standing in front of you, angry and scolding you? Praise be to God for my safety in the end. I leave you with this question. Is it really possible for the inhabitants of a house to be present with you? We've heard many stories, but I leave the answer to you. End of the story. After months of terrifying encounters with the jinn in the apartment, I finally completed my studies and returned to Kuwait. That experience taught me the power of faith and remembrance of God in overcoming fear, and that God is the protector and helper in all circumstances. The lesson: no matter how frightening the challenges may be, faith, patience, and commitment to worship protect us from evil and strengthen us in the toughest situations. Always remember God, and trust that He is with you every step of the way.